All right, thanks, guys. The Chargers take on the Raiders. 8:20 Eastern kickoff this Thursday night in Oakland. The Chargers are -1. Totals at 47.5. Now, we did see a flip of the lines in this one. The Chargers open +1.5, now -1.5. Total open 47, up to 47 and a hook. 57% of the consensus are leaning toward the Chargers. 67% shaded toward the over. Right now, Oakland's -103 on the money line. Now, the Raiders are 5-3 against the spread overall for the year. They're also 4-1 against the number in their last five. They successfully covered the line over Detroit, Houston, Chicago, and Indianapolis in those games. They're coming off a nice 31-24 victory over Detroit. They rank in the top 5 in yards per play, top 10 in rushing. They're led by Jacobs, who's got 740 yards on the year, 6 touchdowns. He's averaging 93 yards per game. Now, Derek Carr, he's kind of quietly having himself a season. He's completing 71% of his passes. He's throwing for over 1,900 yards, 250 yards per game on average. He's got 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Tyrell Williams, 23 catches for 355 yards and 5 touchdowns. Darren Waller, the tight end for the Raiders, 48 catches, 548 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Meanwhile, on the defensive side of things, Whitehead's got 57 tackles, and Maiwa has 5.5 sacks. Now, the Chargers on the other side, they got a couple guys that are banged up. Brandon Mebane, Jeremy Davis, Sam Tevy, Justin Jones, all questionable for this Thursday's action on the short week. The Chargers are in the bottom 10 in scoring, bottom 5 in rushing, bottom 10 in rush yards allowed. They're just 4-5 overall for the year, and they're also just 3-6 against the spread in those 9 games. They failed to cover against Tennessee, Pittsburgh, Denver, Houston, Detroit, and Indianapolis. When it comes to the total, the Chargers are 7-2 to the under overall for the year. They're also 75% to the under on the road. I'm going to lean toward the home dog in this one. Give me Oakland +1 and the under 47.5 in that game. Next matchup, it is going to be Chiefs taking on the Titans, and that's going to be a 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff in Tennessee. The Chiefs are -3.5, total 48 and a hook. Now, we did see a 1-point fade of Kansas City and movement upward on the total. The Chiefs open 4.5, down to -3.5, total open 48, up to 48.5. 72% are leaning Chiefs, 51% shaded toward the under. Right now, the Titans are +160 on the money line. Tennessee just 4-5 straight up on the year, 4-5 against the spread. They're bottom 10 in scoring, bottom 5 in passing yards per game. They're also in the bottom 5 in yards per play. We have Walker, Casey, Jones, and Butler all listed as questionable for the Titans. And kicker Ryan Suckup, he went on the injured reserve with a knee, and of course, that was very, very evident yesterday as he missed 3 kicks. Poor performance by them. Although the Titans did cover if you had them in a teaser. But anyway, the Chiefs on the other side, 6-3 straight up overall for the year, 2-1 against the spread in their last 3. They rank in the top 5th in scoring on average per game, top 5th in rushing and yards per play as well. Patty Mahomes is throwing for nearly 2,200 yards. He's averaging 323 yards per game, 15 touchdowns, 1 interception, 80.8 QBR. Now, LaShawn McCoy has 371 yards on the year. He's averaging 5.2 yards per carry. He's got 2 touchdowns on the ground. Damian Williams also has 3 touchdowns on the ground himself. Now, when it comes to the receiving core, Travis Kelce, 49 catches, 666 yards. He's averaging 74 yards a game. Sammy Watkins, 35 catches, 473 yards, 3 touchdowns. And Tyreek Hill, 22 catches, 386 yards. He's averaging 18 yards per reception. He's got 4 touchdowns through the air, and he is averaging 77 yards per game. A couple other guys to think about. Not a lot of people talk about these guys, but Hardman and Robinson, they both have their share of touchdowns. Actually, McCole Hardman, 4 touchdowns on the year through the air for him. Demarcus Robinson, 3 touchdown receptions as well. Now, on the defensive end, not a lot of people talk about this KC defense. They're led by Emmanuel Ogbah, who's got 4.5 sacks, 7 tackles for losses. And then they got a slew of guys with multiple sacks. Clark, Pasagnan, Okafor, and Jones all had 3 sacks apiece as well. Now, when it comes to the total, Kansas City 2-2 to the under on the road. Titans 5-4 to the under overall for the year. I'm going to purchase the half a point, buy it down, and take Kansas City -3 and the under 48.5 in that game. Next matchup, Falcons taking on the Saints, and that is going to be a 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff in New Orleans. The Saints are -12.5, total 51. We saw a half a point fade of New Orleans and movement upward on the total. The Saints open 13, down to 12.5. Total open 50.5, up to 51. 70% are leaning New Orleans, 64% shaded toward the under. Right now, Atlanta's plus 450 on the money line. The Falcons are just 1-7 straight up on the year, 2-6 against the number. They're currently in the middle of a 6-game losing streak. And their defense allowed 34 points per contest in those 6 defeats. Carpenter, Trufant Smith, and Matty Ice listed as questionable for this Sunday's action. We also have a slew of guys who are on injured reserve. If you didn't know, Wilcox, Means, Cyprian, Bennett, Neal, and Lindstrom all on the IR at the moment. Now Atlanta's in the bottom 5 in rushing, bottom 5 in points allowed, bottom 5 in passing yards allowed. Meanwhile, the Saints on the other side, 7-1 straight up on the year, arguably the best team in the NFC. I know that San Fran is undefeated, but New Orleans looking very, very strong right now. They're 6-2 against the number as well. They're right in the middle of a 6-game winning streak. They scored 31 points or more in 4 out of those 6 games. The Saints are in first place in the NFC South. They're in the top 10 in rushing yards allowed, top 5 in defensive time of possession. They're also top 5 in yards per play at home, and then they're in the top 10 in passing yards allowed at home as well. Kamara and Murray both have over 350 yards rushing on the year. Michael Thomas, 73 catches, 875 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's averaging 109 yards per game. Now on the defensive side, Cam Jordan, 8 sacks on the year. And when it comes to the total, New Orleans 2-2 to the over in their last 4. Atlanta 75% to the over on the road. I'm going to purchase the half a point, slide it down, and take New Orleans -12 and the over 51 in that game. And before we go ahead and move on, just want to take a quick timeout and welcome you to the show. Got some lines and personal leans out for NFL Week 10. But before we get into some more of that, I just want to quickly remind you to check me out on my website at patreon.com/BrockPage, where we do daily premium picks and personal plays on that website, beginning at just $1.99 per month. We also have a bunch of different memberships, tiers, and packages that you can subscribe to. We're 6-3 in our last 9 premium selections on that site. That's going to put us at 75% in our last 15 plays. We're also hitting at 62% in our last 13 NFL package plays on that site. And we're also hitting at 65% for the entire college football season on that website. Link for it is in the description section below. That is patreon.com/BrockPage. All right, let's go ahead and dive into some more lines of personal leans. All starts Eastern Standard Time. And on deck, we've got the Cardinals taking on the Bucs. 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff in Tampa Bay. The Bucs are -3.5, total 53 and a hook. We saw a 2-point fade of Tampa Bay and movement upward on the total. The Bucs open 5.5, down to 3.5. Total open 53, up to 53 and a hook. 54% are leaning Tampa Bay, 63% shaded toward the under. Right now, Arizona's plus 175 on the money line. Now, the Cardinals are just 3-5-1 overall for the year, 0-2 straight up in their last couple of games. Their defense allowed 30 points per game on average in those 2 games. Running backs David Johnson and Chase Edmonds both questionable for this Sunday's action. The Cardinals lost to San Fran, New Orleans, Seattle, Carolina, and Baltimore. They did tie Detroit this year. Now, Arizona, bottom 5 in offensive time of possession, bottom 5 in points allowed. They're also in the bottom 5 in passing yards allowed, and bottom 5 in defensive time of possession. Now, Tampa Bay on the other side, I know they're kind of feast or famine. I know they've had their low points, but they've scored 23 points or more in their last 6 straight. They're in the top 5 in scoring in the NFL. They're also top 10 in passing yards at home, and of course, these stats are average per game. Now, Jameis Winston, I know that he's looked horrible in spots, but he's thrown for over 2,400 yards on the season. He's averaging 313 yards a game through the air, and he's got 16 touchdown passes. Mike Evans, big target for him there. 7 touchdowns for big Mike Evans, 842 receiving yards. He's averaging 105 yards a game. Chris Godwin's right behind him with 6 touchdown receptions a game. He's got 766 receiving yards on the year, and he's averaging just shy of 100 yards a game as well. Now, a guy that not a lot of people were talking about, and they should, Shaq Barrett. This guy has been an absolute monster. He's got 10.5 sacks on the season. Levante David on the other side in the linebacking core, 6.5 tackles for losses. When it comes to the total, Tampa Bay 6-0 to the over in their last 6 games. Arizona 5-4 to the over for the year. So I'm going to purchase the 0.5 point, buy it down, and take Tampa Bay -3 in the over 53.5 in that game. Next matchup, Lions taking on the Bears, and that's going to be a 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff in Chicago. The Bears are -2.5, total 43 and a hook. We saw a 1 point fade of Chicago and movement downward on the total. The Bears open 3.5 down to -2.5. Total open 44 down to 43 and a hook. 67% are leaning Detroit. 76% shaded toward the over. Right now the Lions are +120 on the money line. Detroit 4-4 against the spread overall for the year. 2-2 ATS on the road. They're in the top 5 in passing yards per game. They're also top 10 in offensive time and possession on the road. Matthew Stafford is completing 64% of his passes. He's just shy of 2,500 yards for the year. He's averaging 321 yards passing per game. He's got 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions through the air. Kenny Golladay, he's one of his favorite targets. 640 yards on the year, 7 touchdown receptions. Marvin Jones Jr. right behind him. He's actually got more receptions than Golladay. 42 receptions, 535 yards, 6 touchdowns for Jones. Meanwhile, on the other side, Trey Flowers has 4 sacks on the year, 6 tackles for losses. Now, Chicago, on the other side, they're right in the middle of a 4-game losing streak. They failed to cover the spread in each and every one of those 4 games. Their offense has scored 16 points or less in 5 out of their 8 games this year. They're just 3-5 straight up on the season, 2-6 against the number. They've lost 3 out of their last 4 at home, and they failed to cover in 3 out of those 4 games. Chicago's in the bottom 5 in scoring, bottom 5 in yards per play. We have Daniels, Glasgow, on the other side, for Detroit, we have Daniels, Glasgow, Walker, Hawkinson, and Amani Uye, who are all listed as questionable. So I figured I'd just throw that in there. But anyway, Chicago, I don't think it'll really matter. They're 5-3 to the under overall for the year, 75% to the under at home. I'm going to purchase the 0.5 point, buy it up, and lean toward the road dog in this one. Give me the Lions +3 and the under 43.5 in that game. Next matchup, Bills, Browns, 1 o'clock, Cleveland. The Browns are -2.5. Unbelievable. Browns are -2.5. Totals at 41. We saw a 0.5 point move toward Cleveland and movement downward on the total. The Browns open 2, up to 2.5. Total open 42.5, down to 41. 67% are leaning Buffalo. 83% shaded toward the over. Right now the Bills are +115 on the money line. Buffalo 6-2 straight up overall for the year, 5-3 against the spread, top 10 in rushing, top 5 in yards allowed per play. Tremaine Edmonds has 61 tackles, 6.5 for loss, 5 pass deflections. Jordan Phillips 6 sacks, 10 tackles for losses, and Tre'Davious White 3 interceptions for Buffalo. Now on the other side of the ball, Frank Gore 437 yards on the ground. He's averaging 4.1 yards per carry, and John Brown has 42 catches for 603 yards. He's averaging 75 yards per game for Buffalo. Now, the Bills have successfully covered the number against Washington, Tennessee, New England, the Giants, and the Jets. Meanwhile, Cleveland, on the other side, they are in the middle of a 4-game skid where they failed to cover in each and every one of those 4 games as well. They're bottom 10 in scoring, bottom 5 in rush yards allowed, bottom 5 in points allowed at home. When it comes to this Cleveland team, they're just 2-6 straight up overall, 2-6 against the spread. Winless at home this year, 0-3 straight up at home, and they failed to cover in each and every one of those games at home as well. Now, total-wise, Buffalo 6-2 to the under overall for the year, 3-0 to the under on the road. I'm going to buy the hook, slide it down, and take Buffalo -2 and the under 41 in that game. Next matchup, Giants taking on the Jets, 1 o'clock, New York, MetLife Stadium, the Meadowlands. The Giants are -2.5, total at 43. Now, we did see a flip of the lines in this game. The Giants open plus 1.5, now minus 2.5. Total open 42 up to 43. 68% are leaning Giants, 80% shaded toward the over. Right now, the Jets are plus $1.15 on the money line. The Jets are top 10 in rushing yards allowed, believe it or not. They're also top 10 in yards per play allowed as well. They're led by Jordan Jenkins, who has 3 sacks on the year, 4.5 tackles for loss. Jamal Adams also has 6 tackles for loss on that defensive side of things for the Jets. Kyle Phillips, 5.5 tackles for loss as well. Now, the Giants on the other side, they're in the middle of a 4-game skid. They're just 1-3 against a number in those 4 games. They lost to Detroit, Arizona, New England, and Minnesota in that losing streak. The Giants rank bottom 10 in scoring, bottom 10 in offensive time of possession, bottom 5 in points allowed, and bottom 10 in yards allowed per play. Now, total-wise, the Giants are 4-0 to the under at MetLife Stadium this year. The Jets are 3-1 to the under at home themselves. I'm going to purchase the hook, buy it up, and take the New York Jets plus 3 and the under 43 in that game. Next matchup, Cincinnati taking on the Ravens. And that's going to be a 1 o'clock kickoff in Cincinnati. Baltimore's minus 10, total 46.5. Not a whole lot of movement on the spread. We did see movement upward on the total, however. Baltimore open and remains minus 10. Total open 46 up to 46.5. 67% are leaning Baltimore. 57% shaded toward the under. Right now, Cincinnati's plus 380 on the money line. Cincinnati still winless on the year. 0-8 straight up. 3-5 against the spread. Bottom 5 in scoring. Bottom 5 in rushing. Bottom 10 in yards allowed. Bottom 5 in rush yards allowed. Glenn Miller and Lawson all questionable for this Sunday's action. Green, Wynn, Kirkpatrick, Denard, Ross, and Scott all on the injured reserve. Ryan Finley has been named the starting quarterback for the Bengals for this Sunday. Now, Baltimore on the other side coming off a real nice, very impressive 17-point victory versus New England. They won 37-20 in a game where they were plus 3. They were the underdogs in that game. That's going to put Baltimore at 6-2 straight up overall for the year. First place in the AFC North. They're right in the middle of a 4-game winning streak, 3-1 against a number in those 4 games. Lamar Jackson, he's averaging 306 yards per game through the air, 12 touchdown passes, 5 interceptions, 71.9 QBR. He's also rushed for 637 yards. He's their leading rusher. And he's also rushed for 5 touchdowns on the season. Mark Ingram, he's right behind him with 585 yards on the ground, 7 touchdowns. He's averaging 5.1 yards per carry. Now on the defensive side of things, Matthew Judon, 4 sacks, 5.5 for tackles for loss. Humphrey and Thomas, 2 interceptions apiece. And when it comes to the total, Baltimore 5-3 to the over, 75% to the over on the road. Cincinnati 3-0 to the over at home. I'm going to lean Baltimore minus 10. And the over 46.5 in that game. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the afternoon slate. And our first game in that particular slate will be the Dolphins taking on the Colts, 4:05 Indianapolis. The Colts are minus 11.5, total 43. We actually saw a 4-point fade of Indianapolis and movement downward on the total. The Colts open 15.5, down to minus 11.5. Total open 44, down to 43. 62% are leaning Miami, 71% shaded toward the under. Right now, the Colts have failed to cover in their last 2 games. We have Desir, Kelly, and Brissett all listed as questionable. Brissett's got a bum knee, really took a shot to that knee in his last game. T.Y. Hilton still out indefinitely for the Colts as well. Indianapolis ranks bottom 10 in passing, bottom 10 in yards per play. They're also bottom 10 in rushing at home and bottom 10 in yards per play allowed at home. Now, Miami on the other side, they're coming off a win, a 26-18 victory over the Jets. And a lot of people aren't talking about this, but the Dolphins are a perfect 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 games. They're on a nice little winning streak there against the number. 4-0 ATS in their last 4 games. They rank 8th in passing yards allowed on the road. They're led by Taco Charlton, who's got 4 sacks on the year, 4.5 tackles for loss. Jerome Baker, 54 tackles on the year, 36 of those solo. Devontae Parker on the offensive side of things, 28 catches, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns receiving. Now, on the injury side of things for Miami, we have Jones, Kilgore, and Williams listed as questionable although we are optimistic they will be able to play this Sunday. Now, total-wise, Miami 2-1 to the over in their last 3. Indianapolis 5-3 to the over on the year, 75% to the over at home. I'm going to purchase the half a point, buy it up, and take Miami plus 12 and the over 43 in that game. Next matchup, Rams taking on the Steelers. 425 Heinz Field in Pittsburgh. The Rams are minus 4.5, total 44 and a hook. We saw a 1 point move toward the Rams and movement downward on the total. The Rams open 3.5 up to 4.5, total open 45 and a hook, down to 44 and a hook. 68% are leaning Rams, 87% shaded toward the over. Right now the Steelers are plus 170 on the money line. Pittsburgh 5-3 against the spread overall for the year, and they've actually successfully covered the number in 5 out of their last 6. They have successful covers over Indianapolis, Chargers, Baltimore, Cincinnati, and San Francisco. Devin Bush is leading the charge on the defensive side of things. He's got 66 tackles on the year, 42 of those solo, 4.5 tackles for loss. T.J. Watt, 7.5 sacks for him, 11 tackles for loss. Bud Dupree, 6 sacks for him, 9 tackles for loss. And Minkah Fitzpatrick, 4 interceptions on the year. He actually had a pick 6 yesterday, a 96-yard touchdown for him. Now this Pittsburgh defense is top 10 in yards per play allowed, and they are 4th in passing yards allowed at home. Now the Rams on the other side, losers in 3 out of their last 5 straight up. We have Brandon Cooks, Brown, and Hager listed as questionable for this Sunday's action. Joe Noteboom out for the season when it comes to this offensive line. So a key player there for the Rams on the O-line. Clay Matthews is out indefinitely. He broke his jaw. And the Rams bottom 10 in defensive time of possession. They failed to cover in 4 out of their last 5 head-to-head matchups with the Steelers, if you're into historical trends. Now, total-wise, Pittsburgh is 6-1 to the over in their last 7, taking on the NFC. They're also 60% to the over at home. So with all that said and done, I'm going to buy the hook, buy it up, and take Pittsburgh plus 5 and the over 44.5 in that game. Next matchup, Panthers. Packers, 425 Green Bay. The Packers are minus 5.5, total at 48. We saw a 1.5 point fade of Green Bay and movement downward on the total. The Packers open minus 7, down to minus 5.5. Total open 48.5, down to 48 even. 55% are leaning Green Bay, 74% shaded toward the over. Right now, Carolina's plus 195 on the money line. Carolina is bottom 10 in passing, bottom 10 in defensive time of possession. They're also bottom 10 in points allowed and bottom 5 in rush yards allowed as well. Addison and Little are listed as questionable. Cam Newton still out indefinitely, and their defense has given up 31. Their defense has given up 31 points per contest in their last 4. Now the Packers on the other side, 4-1 straight up in their last 5. They're also 6-3 against the spread overall for the year. They've covered over Kansas City, Oakland, Dallas, Denver, Minnesota, and Chicago. The Packers are in the top 10 in scoring, top 10 in passing, top 5 in defensive time of possession. They're led by Blake Martinez, who has 95 tackles on the year. No, I am not lying. I am not making that up. 95 tackles on the year, 4.5 tackles for loss. Zadarius Smith, 8.5 sacks for him. Kevin King, 3 interceptions. Now, Aaron Rodgers is completing 65% of his passes. He's just shy of 2,500 yards for the year, 17 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. Aaron Jones is having one hell of a year for the Packers. He's got 8 rushing touchdowns. He's averaging 4.1 yards per carry. He's also got 354 yards receiving out of the backfield and 3 receiving touchdowns. Jimmy Graham also has 3 receiving touchdowns out of that tight end spot. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 420 yards receiving. He's averaging 19.1 yards per catch. Now, total-wise, Green Bay, 5-4 to the over on the year, 60% to the over at home, 5-2 to the over in their last 7. Carolina, 4-0 to the over in their last 4 games, 6-2 to the over for the season. I'm going to purchase the half a point, buy it down, and take the Packers minus 5 and the over 48 in that game. All right, let's go ahead and slide into our Sunday night game. We got the Vikings taking on the Cowboys, 8:20 Eastern kickoff in Dallas. The Cowboys are minus 3, total 47. 64% are leaning Minnesota, 81% shaded toward the over. Right now, the Vikings are plus 125 on the money line. Minnesota just 2-3 straight up away from home, 2-3 against the number in that same category. They're bottom 10 in defensive time of possession on the road. They also lost to Kansas City, Chicago, and Green Bay. Now Dallas on the other side, 3-1 straight up at Jerry's World, 3-1 against the spread at home as well. Dak Prescott is completing 71% of his passes. He's thrown for over 2,100 yards on the year. He's averaging 327 yards per game through the air. He's got an 81.1 QBR. Now Zeke Elliott, 602 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns, 24 catches. He's averaging 7.3 yards per reception out of the backfield. Amari Cooper, 38 catches for 621 and 5 touchdowns. Michael Gallup, 421 yards on the year. He's averaging 16 yards per reception. Now on the defensive side of things, Smith and Van Der Esch over 50 tackles apiece. DeMarcus Lawrence has 3.5 sacks, 5 tackles for losses, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries. Dallas is top 10 in scoring, top 5 in rushing and passing. They're also top 5 in yards per play, and they are top 5 in points allowed at home. Now, total-wise, Dallas 3-2 to the under in their last 5. Minnesota 60% to the under on the road. I'm going to lean Cowboys -3, under 47 in that game. Next and final matchup for the show, it is going to be Monday Night Football. Seattle taking on San Francisco. 8:15 Eastern kickoff in San Francisco. The Niners are -6, total 45.5. So a half a point move towards San Fran and movement upward on the total. The Niners open 5.5 up to 6. Total open 44.5 up to 45 and a hook. 63% are leaning Seattle, 81% shaded toward the over. Right now, the Seahawks are plus 220 on the money line. Seattle's covered just 4 out of 9 overall for the year. They're bottom 5 in passing yards allowed, bottom 5 in yards per play allowed as well. They failed to cover over Atlanta, Baltimore, the Rams, New Orleans, and Cincinnati. Now San Fran on the other side, they are undefeated on the year, 8-0 straight up, 5-3 against the number, top 5 in scoring, top 5 in rushing, top 5 in offensive time of possession. Matt Breida leads the charge with 524 yards on the ground. He's averaging 5.3 yards per carry. He's also got 1 touchdown through the air. Now, Tevin Coleman, he's got 5 rushing touchdowns himself. He's averaging 4.3 yards per carry, and he's got 1 touchdown reception as well. George Kittle, the big tight end, 46 catches, 541 yards. He's averaging 68 yards per game. Meanwhile, on the defensive side of things, Eric Armstead, 5.5 sacks, 8 tackles for losses, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery. Nick Bosa, he's having himself a year. He's got 7 sacks for the Niners, 11.5 tackles for loss, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery. And D Ford's got 5.5 sacks on the year. Richard Sherman leading the secondary with 3 interceptions. Now, total-wise, San Fran 2-0 to the over in their last 2. Seattle 3-2 to the over in their last 5. I'm going to lean San Francisco -6 in the over 45.5 in that game. All right, let's slide into our quick pick recap brought to you by patreon.com/Brock page, where we are currently 6-3 in our last 9 premium selections on that site. I like San Francisco -6 over 45.5, Dallas -3 under 47, Pittsburgh +5 over 44.5, Green Bay -5 over 48, Miami +12 over 43, Jets +3 under 43, Kansas City -3 under 48.5, Detroit +3 under 43 and a hook, Buffalo -2 under 41, Baltimore -10 over 46.5, New Orleans -12 over 51, Tampa Bay -3 over 53.5, and last but certainly not least, I like Oakland +1 and the under 47.5 in that game. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me. Once again, don't forget to check me out on my website at patreon.com/Brock page, where we went 6-3 in our last 9 premium selections on that site. We're also hitting at 75% in our last 15 premium selections on that site as well. We're 62% in our last 13 NFL package plays, and we're currently hitting at 65% for the entire college football season. We do daily plays on that site beginning at just $1.99 per month. We have a bunch of different tiers, memberships, and packages that you can subscribe to. And you can also access my current record for free right on the homepage. All you got to do is click the link in the description section below. That is patreon.com/Brock page. But most importantly, guys, I got to thank you for tuning in right here on YouTube. I really hope you enjoyed all this great free content, all this great free information. Happy Monday to you. Best of luck to you. And don't forget to check me out on patreon.com/Brock page.